Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean.
It's Shakespeare's ultimate love story and one of the world's greatest ballet scores. With definitive choreography by Kenneth Macmillan, Romeo and Juliet has become internationally acclaimed as one of the true classics of the modern ballet repertoire.
As a dancer, I lived with this piece for over 20 years, and performing Romeo was a real highlight of my career. As Macmillan's production comes to BBC Two, I'm going to explore the world of this great ballet, the Shakespeare story that inspired it, and the two central characters who exercise such an enduring hold on the world's imagination.
It's a story that's happened everywhere in some way or another. In any country, in any culture, there's always going to be two people. I'm sure there is a Romeo and Juliet right now in Gaza, you know what I mean?
We are also actors. We need to bring it as close as possible to the audience. So for me, it's trying to get the Romeo that I have within me, which everybody has, you know, and trying to make it as truthful as possible.
We all know what it's like to love the wrong person, and perhaps that's one reason why this story is so universally popular, and why thousands are still drawn to Juliet's legendary balcony in Verona.
It speaks to people because it's got loads of life. It's a cross between a fantasy and a cautionary tale, isn't it? We'd all like to believe that we can lose ourselves in a love that disastrous, that all-consuming, but we'd also like to see somebody else go through it so that we don't have to. The language of the play excites your intellect. The beauty of the play excites your emotions, and the physical sexiness of the play excites your will. So basically you're firing on all cylinders if you're composing well, anything, really.
The play has been an endless source of inspiration to filmmakers, artists, and above all, musicians. After Tchaikovsky, the next great Russian version of Romeo and Juliet was the ballet score written in 1935 by Sergei Prokofiev. Prokofiev had lived in the West since the end of the First World War, but in the 30s he decided to return to what was now Stalin's Soviet Union for good.
People now look at his return to the Soviet Union at the very time when he was writing Romeo and Juliet, and they're amazed because they know about the concentration camps, they know about the millions of people who died. And they say, why did he do that? What a terrible time to go back. Well, it was a terrible time to go back. But think, what did he have in the West? He had Mussolini, he had Hitler, he had Franco, for heaven's sake. Russia, to Russians at that stage, seemed to be a strong country. And when the Soviet authorities said to him, Sergei Sergeyevich, come back to your native land and we will give you the conditions in which you can write the music that you want to write, like Romeo and Juliet, of course he went back. Stalin has now decided that his people need operas and ballets. Why? Because he likes Swan Lake and he likes Boris Godunov and he likes these big imposing pieces from the past because they suggest power. We are now the home. He was constantly saying it, Stalin, or he was getting other people to say it for him. We are now the true repositories of the old culture. So suddenly the theatre directors, instead of doing modern plays, they have to do Shakespeare. So the choice of Romeo and Juliet fits plumb into the middle of this.
Prokofiev is a genius. It is raw with the emotions and blunt and absolutely precise. You know, the whole range of emotions that you can take from this music. It is definitely not monotonous. It's definitely not peachy color, you know. It has reds and blacks and blues and yellows and every flavor and every taste of all the drama.
Prokofiev's ballet has even scored its own hit single in the iconic Dance of the Nights.
Hello.
A ready-made soundtrack for adverts, documentaries, even sports events.
Прокофьева интересует не драка между Монтекки и Капулетти, а его интересуют характеры этих людей, которые на протяжении многих десятилетий продолжают сохранять вражду. Мы слышим в этой музыке характеры людей невероятно упрямых, невероятно сильных, невероятно капризных в своей выражении своей воли. И Прокофьев это достигает, во-первых, чрезвычайно простой и прямолинейной мелодией, чрезвычайно простой, ясной гармонией, чрезвычайно точной ритмикой. Кажется, что эту ритмику невозможно столкнуть. Абсолютное своеволие этих людей. И мы начинаем понимать, что прав персонаж из Шекспира «Пролог», который говорит, что только смерть этих героев Ромео и Джульетты кладет конец вражде. И иначе она будет бесконечной.
Prokofiev had a natural gift for melody. When tunes came into his head, he jotted them down and he kept hundreds and thousands of pages of notebooks where there was all this material. When he had to write a piece, instead of going out for a walk and saying, well, where's the first tune of my symphony or whatever, he would look in his notebooks, find a suitable tune and start working from that. Romeo and Juliet is a classic example of that. All the tunes in it, all the ideas in it have been written before. Once he starts working on the ballet, he needs to conjure up an image of Juliet, for example, so he looks for a fresh, girlish tune. He really did write most of this score in a few weeks, incredible though it may seem. Well, he could only do that because he had all the material already.
About the music, Prokofiev music and my character in Romeo, you know, it's this romantic boy, you know, that is Romeo, and you know, in the beginning it's all you know, longing, this longingness for love and to be loved and to experience, you know, and at times it's very sunny, very young, very useful, and all that is in the score. It's just great.
Prokofiev's ballet was first performed in Russia in 1940. With choreography by Leonid Lavrovsky, it was a huge success at the Kirov and soon restaged at the Bolshoi.
There was an effort to make the ballet as realistic, as far from the kind of fairy tale stories of the 19th century as possible. Lavrovsky saw it much more in terms of a kind of social dynamic, a social battle.
wasn't long before the ballet became a key calling card for Soviet culture on the international stage.
Lavrovsky's version of Romeo and Juliet was first performed here at Covent Garden in 1956 by Moscow's Bolshoi Ballet, making their first ever trip to the West. For British audiences, the impact was stunning.
Juliet was amazing because it was so huge a production, and Ulanova was marvellous.
Everybody was just amazed, astonished, astounded at the amount of people on the stage and the size of the production.
The whole production had enormous weight to it in the best sense, in the character sense. And we saw these very much older dancers than anything we were used to on stage in a whole range of roles, even to what we might call the quarter ballet. And one example of this was the first dance, the Dance of the Knights in the ballroom scene, which they did as a cushion dance. And they used to have these cushions, and they would come forward very strongly and magnificently, and then they'd lay them at the foot of the lady. And it was all very lordly, and we thought it was fantastic.
In the early 60s, the Royal Ballet wanted to perform Lavrovsky's version of the ballet themselves as part of the celebrations for Shakespeare's 400th birthday. But the Soviet authorities made it practically impossible for the choreographer to leave Russia.
Instead, Frederick Ashton, director of the Royal Ballet, decided to create an entirely new Romeo and Juliet based on the Prokofiev score and invited the brilliant Kenneth Macmillan to choreograph it.
Macmillan was a master storyteller in dance. His ballet tells Shakespeare's tale in a compelling series of vibrant and violent crowd scenes set against the most intense and intimate duets.
I think Macmillan was the first of the British choreographers to see that ballet could be about psychology rather than emotion. What Macmillan does is get to the subconscious, if you like. He's interested in the darker, stranger, rawer elements that make up human relationships, human emotion. He was much more willing than any other British choreographer before him to allow ballet to look strange or ugly or weird or distorted.
Kenneth always used to say, you know, that he didn't want us to look like ballet dancers. We had to be like actors, feel the role, to forget that we'd been, you know, doing the Prince and Swan Lake or the Prince and Sleeping Beauty and be a real person.
I am very interested in people, and I wanted to portray the dilemma of people living and working and being with each other. I wanted to show that kind of thing in ballet, and that at that time, that was not a very popular thing to do. I think people were very interested in the purely decorative side of ballet, and I was not.
Kenneth didn't want larger-than-life ballet characters. He was far more interested in all of his characters reacting and responding to each other in a natural and human way. He never used ballet mime. And by ballet mime, I mean gestures that have a meaning. For instance, this means love, this is beautiful, marry, die, angry, royal. Macmillan had none of that. All of those words and emotions
were portrayed through his choreography and by natural human reaction. So when Romeo first meets Juliet, he just stands there and looks at her, walks very slowly over to her, reaches down and takes her hand and kisses it very, very gently. And it says more than any mime ever could. Macmillan's approach was radical and challenging. He needed to work with dancers who were instinctively sympathetic to his ideas, and found the ideal young couple in Christopher Gable and Lynn Seymour.
She was his muse. She had done several ballets for him by then. She would try anything. She didn't care what she looked like. She'd go for it.
Some of the moments in the choreography that we now take for granted, but at the time were considered quite shocking, would have come out of her input. For instance, the moment where Juliet drinks the poison and retches it up again. I mean, that was considered a very un-ballerina thing to do.
In one of the great ironies of ballet history, there is no surviving film record of those extraordinary performances by Seymour and Gable. Although Macmillan had created this work so intimately on them, the all-important premiere was given to the company's reigning superstars, Margot Fonteyn and Rudolf Nureyev.
There was this huge chemistry that they had. They had, you know, a glamour, and they had caught the public's imagination. And Kenneth was kind of forced into giving them the first night because, you know, it was on public demand. He didn't really want it, but, you know, the problem with them was that she was getting on, and he was too starry, really.
When Nureyev and Fonteyn danced that premiere in February 1965, the reception was staggering, with 40 minutes of applause and 43 curtain calls. Today, over 40 years later, Macmillan's Romeo and Juliet is performed by ballet companies across the world, and it's still one of the most popular works in the repertoire here at Covent Garden.
I hardly spoke any English when I first did Juliet, and I really needed to understand deeply who she was. So I bought a fantastic version that I've never found again, that is one page in English, one page in Spanish, so I could basically know word by word what it was written.
These two kids, when they meet, speak a sonnet to each other. To meet somebody and to be able to share a quatrain from a sonnet and then have them come back at you with another quatrain and then rhyme. I mean, it's like sort of word sex. It's the stuff of dreams.
The beginning of the balcony panorama, when he just first arrived and it's completely still and you just don't move, and I can always hear the words of Shakespeare, I've never seen beauty until this night, you know, and it's this first time that you know he's there for you, and you know you could run away, you could go back, but this love just keeps you still. the speed, the running from one side to another. That's the joy of being in love when you're young. That's that feeling of being light on your feet. That is of not touching the floor, of never needing to eat or sleep ever again. All of that he put into the steps.
Obviously, Romeo and Juliet is a love story, and we now expect love stories to be very sexy. And here are two young teenagers driven, really, by passion and lust to brave death. We see them kind of born on a tide of desire without actually any overt sexual language. At the same time, because Macmillan, in a sense, was working between the spaces of the music and the choreography, he gives us little gaps where the lovers have time to show us that they are just caving with desire.
Tamara it's been a blessing because it's the best Juliet that you could have. It's just amazing, and that we had this chemistry, which I think is true. It's true, you know. I am in love with her on the stage, and I see her, and I see her eyes, and I want to kiss her, and all that. That is very, very difficult. So one make the role real.
Well, he is wonderful because he's a great person, a great friend. We have lots of things in common, our cultural background and our technique and the way we dance is very similar. But also he's a very warm person, and you can feel that when you're dancing with him. You can feel the love and the passions and everything, and you can see it in his face very easily. So it's much easier for me to also interact with my partner that way.
Of course, love and passion are a gift to the stage, but any version of this play stands or falls on its handling of tragedy. For me, Macmillan absolutely measures up to the power and depth of Shakespeare in his shattering final scene when Romeo and Juliet, in turn, dance with their lover's corpse.
That is a true piece of theater. I mean, that really is what theater is supposed to be. That is my skills put towards your feelings. I don't feel like a corpse. I have to do things. I'm actually dancing, I'm moving, I'm using my muscles. I can see it in my head, exactly what shape I'm making while I'm dancing. But this is all for your benefit, so that I look like a corpse and you feel I'm dead. So that's the classical lean simmer, you know. I'm not enjoying it, but I'm doing it so that you enjoy it. Because the best thing for me would be just to let it go and really feel dead, and that would be very self-indulgent and wonderful, but it wouldn't look right.
It's not you trying to copy somebody else or trying to be like Nureyev or trying to be, because it's not gonna happen. So when I see the ballet or I see videos that I could compare and see what somebody did or what, you know, it's trying to understand, you know, okay, that's the point, and I know why he's doing that, the other, and then get that and trying to adapt it to you and then do it your own way and tell the story in your own way.
You know what? I think it's really hard to say whether the play is a tragedy because it shouldn't have happened, or a tragedy because it did happen and it's very sad. Whenever I watch the play, I don't know that I can say, of course they shouldn't really have fallen in love with each other. Because you think, wouldn't you want to? Just for one night? Wouldn't it be best to live 13 and a half years and have that one night and then die glorious and leave a beautiful corpse? Or do you live careful and die of nothing at all, age 75, regretting everything? I don't know. I never know when I watch the play what we're meant to think. Whether we're meant to think, oh no, I wish that hadn't happened, or actually, I wish I could be him.
Yeah, it's a dream role for every dancer because it's, you know, it's the most romantic ballet that you could find. Ultimately, it's, I mean, you cannot top that balcony ballet at the end, you know, with that kiss and everything, you know, it's glory.
I think any artist becomes an artist because he wants to be many things. He wants to be other people in a way. And I think it's a very human need to feel more, to live more. And when you're given the opportunity to do something like Juliet, that gives you everything, gives you youth and love and commitment and doubts and betrayal and death. It's just such a rainbow of emotions that you have to go through in 3 hours. It's just fantastic.
I think magic is a good word for Romeo and Juliet, because magic is not just a nice thing, it has dark sides. I think we would like to believe that there is such a thing as magic in the world, which allows us to see beyond the drab, wretched ordinariness into something transcendental, which might in fact kill us, and does in this story destroy these two people, but nevertheless is a privilege to be caught up by. And I think that magic is that sort of thing, not necessarily pleasant, not necessarily helpful, but utterly unstoppable, and in the end, something that you want to meet at least once in your life.